Hi, podcast listeners. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. We have so many guests on this show making a difference in our lives, making a difference all around the world with the expertise that they bring. And yet so many of you are reaching out to me saying, you want more. It's not enough just what we're putting on these podcast episodes for you. And so I am here to extend a very warm welcome to you to our Difference Maker community, where you can join for as little as $5 a month to get all this extra content. Out the gate, you're going to get 30 plus mini-sodes of exclusive content not available for the regular podcast listeners, and an exclusive mini-sode every month. And you'll get exclusive voting power to help us pick podcast topics and more. And that's at our Changers tier. There's 3 different main tiers and then an extra larger tier. But whatever tier that you join at, you will be included in this extra content. And I know that many of you are wanting to go a little bit deeper. And so even though it gets a little wild in there sometimes because of how deep we go, I want you to join us there. This extra content is very special. It means a great deal to me to be a part of this community with you. And I would love to just exchange ideas or perspectives that you have around these different episodes. And that's the place where we do it. So please show up to our Difference Maker community. Give us $5 out of your pocket every month. And I think that you'll have a lot of fun in there because we do. And I would love for you to join us. So go to patreon.com/A World of Difference to join us there. We're all about community here at the A World of Difference podcast, and we would love for you to join our community. Everybody around the world is welcome to join us in our Patreon community, where we have extra content. We go into deeper dives, and we have all kinds of fun perks if you stay with us for a while, like merch. But also, it's just a place for us to join together. We've had a Facebook group for a little while, but Facebook's doing all kinds of wacky things these days. So putting a little more intentional effort into our Patreon community, which is designed for us to join together in deeper ways there. So I'd love for you to join us. This is your official warm welcome. And please check us out at patreon.com/A World of Difference. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm Lori Adams Brown, and this is a podcast for those who are different and want to make a difference. Today, we have a very special guest on the show that I met at PodFest in Orlando in January. She was speaking on being a TikTok influencer. So today, we get to welcome Melissa Hughes to the show, an international speaker and a best-selling author. She's been booked twice on The Kelly Clarkson Show and featured for the New York Times bestseller Primal Scream on NBC. She has 240,000 followers on TikTok with over 11 million likes. She's also a best-selling author of a book, She Can Laugh, along with a children's book called Mommy Loves You When. She's done missionary work in the UK for several years with her husband and 2 children, where they worked in church planting. And now she lives somewhere very, very cold and snowy with her kids, which is kind of what landed her into this unexpected world of TikTok influencer. But she comes to the show today to talk about her journey to that, which was very unexpected, and her tips on any of you who are wanting to be a content creator and how she can help you to work that out through TikTok if you're interested in her influencer skills. And then also she brings her faith into everything she does, both as a mom, as a TikTok influencer, as an author, and a speaker. And so I hope you really enjoy what she has to say today. A very, very warm welcome to Melissa Hughes to the show today. Hi, Melissa. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Lori. How are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to see your smiling face on this beautiful sunny day in California. I'm not sure what kind of weather you're experiencing, but you live somewhere cold, right?
Unfortunately. No. Yeah, I live in Michigan. So right now I'm looking at bare trees and clouds.
I'm so sad. Well, I know a lot of your TikTok followers love seeing your kids in the snow. So there's some perks to that, at least. It's beautiful and kids like to play in it. My kids love the snow as well. We like to go up to Tahoe, which incidentally has gotten so much snow this year that my husband's 50th birthday bash with our micro church got completely sabotaged because all roads were closed going into Tahoe. We were literally at the edge of it and watching the snow come down and with our kids in the car and everything. And all these like news cameras from all these TV stations were there. And we're like, what is happening? And they're like, you can't go to Tahoe. We're like, no.
Oh my gosh.
So anyway, but we live in a place where we can drive to snow and leave it behind, which does have its advantages as opposed to you probably get snow days and snowed in and that kind of thing.
We do, which the kids love. And it is pretty around Christmas
Mhm.
time, but then there comes a point. Like now it's like, it's April 3. Let's move on.
Right.
You
For
know?
sure. It should be springtime. Ugh.
Yeah.
Well, I would love for you to give a little bit about your background, who you are, and how you even got started in being a TikTok influencer for those who don't know you yet.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was, I say that I accidentally went viral, which I guess everybody does. It was never my plan. I wasn't on the platform. What had happened was, I actually had moved home from church planting in the UK with my husband. We came home right before COVID. I got a job and then COVID hit and I lost my job. And then we were trying to buy a house. So I took a job working in childcare. And I was dropping my kids off at one end of the building and looking after someone else's, which it was just not the dream. And so I was really just praying, like, God, what's the next step? I have no idea. Like, we've come home from church planting and now it's a shutdown. Like, what should I do? I don't want to be working in childcare. And it was in January of 2021, God just started speaking to me about posting videos on social media. And it was really odd and out of left field and really strange. And I remember talking to my husband about it, being like, I feel like I'm supposed to do this. And he was like, what would you talk about? I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
um, and then I posted my first video, which was just a video of my kids sledding on TikTok, which I was not on. And the next morning I woke up, it had gotten 22 million views, and I ended up on the Kelly Clarkson show. So I felt like that was confirmation.
Yeah,
And then I just
definitely.
continued posting videos in my car while working my childcare job, grew my account that year, and then was actually able to leave a year later because I replaced my income.
It's just such a wild, bizarre, situation that would really only happen, in the last few years where these things have even become like a job and a possibility. And it's a strange, unpredictable turn of events. But I do want to dig a little bit into your experience and time of living abroad because so many of our audience today listening has moved countries before, maybe currently living abroad themselves, and have definitely gone through things such as the good old culture shock. So,
Mhm.
did you experience any culture shock when you moved abroad? And if so, how did you cope with that?
Yeah, so we moved to the UK, and my husband's originally from there. Since I've been like a little girl, I've always wanted to like travel there. And then when we had the opportunity to live there, I was just a big fat yes. So I would say our experience, I didn't experience anything like culture shock, but what did happen was a month after moving there, my husband got into a horrible car accident. And so, when you feel like God's called you to a place and you have all these hopes and dreams of, obviously selling everything and moving across country and then getting there, and then your husband gets into a bad car accident. And at that point, we had no house, no car, no jobs, no furniture, no place to live. And so the only place that would rent to us was a funeral home in the valley of Wales. So we lived in a valley on top of a funeral home. And then after that, we found a place that would rent to us, and it was on a cemetery. um, so I would say I feel like I'm so American, but I'm super friendly anyway. So like new experiences like that, I just like slid right in. But I will say what was shocking was what worked in America, what didn't work in the UK. So I think like if we were just going to live, I didn't experience any type of like shock. I just like loved it. I soaked it in. But as far as like figuring out what the Holy Spirit was doing and what God was doing in that area, I was just totally going in with the same blueprint, that of what we had done in the States, and figured out quickly that it's a different people, it's different culture. They don't receive the same way. And so that was what was very surprising.
Yeah, that's just the gig, right? And I think it might be more shocking in a place where even just the physical features of the bodies look the same. The language is supposedly the same, right? And so you don't expect it as much in a place like where it's like, I don't know, maybe your ancestors came from that area. So you kind of look like you're from there. You speak English, but the accent's a little bit different, but it can throw you off even more. Like, I think we expect culture shock more. Like, for example, me, when I moved all the way to Asia and lived in Indonesia 10 years or Singapore 10 years, certainly people looked at me and didn't expect me to get it. Even growing up in Latin America, there was a little bit of that as well. But certainly it can be a little more shocking. I've heard people often say out of the UK, sometimes Americans, you can come across even just like, we tend to want to like compliment people early on, especially women. I feel like we're just really big on complimenting people, but sometimes it can come across as maybe even disingenuous or that you're trying to flatter. And so people are like, wait, can I trust this person? Why are they complimenting me? Like they question it a little bit. Did you ever face anything like that?
What I realized was I am like the classic stereotypical American girl because I have blonde hair, I'm really friendly, I'm super smiley, and it's normal, like that is really truly who I am. But I guess I didn't realize that I was like that stereotypical American girl. And I was homecoming queen in high school. So like
Yeah,
they just loved like all of that.
right.
So I loved everybody. I don't know if they thought I was disingenuous. If they did, I never knew about it, and I'm blissfully unaware. But I
Maybe
loved
that's
them.
better.
Yeah,
Right.
and I just love the food. There in the UK specifically though, I do find that they are much more closed off on the surface, but once you're in with them, I mean, they'll go deep and
Yeah.
they're loyal. And so yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Oh, that is so beautiful. And I'm glad that you got to experience that living there. And I know that, many of us who move overseas have these hopes and dreams. Sometimes they're a bit grandiose, but that's what motivates us to do it because it takes a lot of courage to move across
Yeah.
the world and start all over with your life. And however you do it, whether you take a crate full of furniture or you just go with your suitcases or whatever situation you're in, it's a hard thing to do. So sometimes we have to have those big dreams, that whole American dream people talk about that brings people to these borders, but also the same reason we go to live abroad and do the same things that we do. But at the same time, those dreams being dashed can be so heartbreaking,
Oh,
especially experiencing what you did. And so, as you experienced your husband having this car accident so soon, and you had to walk through this not only culture shock, but shock and awe of the dream being kind of not realized,
yeah.
how did you sort of cope with that being overseas away from your family and all that? Like, what are some tips? Because people face those kinds of things
Oh.
too.
This question is probably one of my most favorite questions because it was so transformative for me. But in all honesty, as like a Christian and as a believer, you know, for a year and a half, this blows my mind, but for a year and a half to 2 years, my confession was, it's okay. We're going to get, God's good. We're going to just get through it. It's going to be fine. And if I was struggling at all, which I was, but like I wasn't talking about it and I wasn't opening up about it and I wasn't real about it, especially like in my relationship with God, like I absolutely pretended. I wouldn't have said that. I would have just said I have faith. But the truth was I was just so discouraged and so disappointed. It wasn't just the accident. There were so many other things that actually happened to us during that time, that are just so unusual. It was unusual. You know, when that saying, like, everything you touch turns to gold? It was the opposite. It was like everything we touched just like turned to crap. And I'm not saying there wasn't good things that happened during that time and we met amazing people and the church did good, but it was a season of truly being in a valley spiritually and physically. But I remember a friend calling me up from back home and she was like, "Hey Melissa, how are you doing?" And I was like, we've had some challenges, but God's good. We're going to get through it. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And she was like, "Melissa, it's okay just to say that things are really hard right now." And Lori, could not even like allow myself to experience that emotion or experience really what I was feeling because it would have been the unraveling of me, and it was.
Mm,
And so I
mm,
took that. I actually had to take time to say that, to acknowledge that, to experience that, because as a church leader who's leading people who just gave up everything to do this, it wasn't just like, oh, we're having a hard time. I actually was really questioning, is God good? Like,
mm,
why? Like, I felt him call me to do this. Like, I felt so betrayed, but I can't show that. I can't actually process that. And but it was really, truly giving myself permission to be unraveled and
mm,
totally a mess, which I was. I was struggling horribly with insomnia and anxiety. Like, I allowed myself, which almost, it was so scary.
yeah.
It was like, that was where I was at. And I had to wrestle with God. And He
Mm,
didn't, pull me out. I had to really wrestle with these feelings and these questions. And like, even acknowledging, like, wow, God was good because my life was good, but is God still good when life's not good? And
mm.
so we lived in a valley on a cemetery, and I'm facing these questions. And I wrestled that question for a couple of years. And I'll never forget walking around this beautiful park that was right by our house with two children. Just like, again, just being like, God, I just feel like I feel like a mess. I feel like these bare trees that just feel so lifeless and fruitless on the outside. And I just said, God, how could anything good come from this? And I truly felt like he bent down and whispered into such like a tender part of my heart. And he just said, Melissa, mountaintop experiences are for sights and inspiration, but the fruit grows in the valleys. And he
Mm,
totally, like, when you just get a download, but I just realized that this was not a season of external goodness, of external fruit. This was a season of God producing something else in me on the inside. There's a scripture in the Bible that says that your faith will be tested, which will be proven of greater worth than gold. It's in James. And it was a season where God was producing greater worth than gold of, really truly, do you believe me when is it just when I'm good, or do you have faith in who I am? And he just flipped the script on me. And I realized that this was a season of fruitfulness on the inside. And he changed my perspective and really started to like minister to my heart. And so, then things, I mean, I'll be honest, it wasn't then sunshine and rainbows.
right.
But it was like the beginning of starting to be like, wow, and really starting to study, like when David was spent a lot of times in caves, Moses spent so much time in the wilderness. I know none of us like those seasons. Jesus hung on a cross, but sometimes those are necessary as a believer.
I just wanted to take a minute to pause and lament and give us a little space to just grieve. Um, I think around the world, people have heard the news that happened here in the United States just days ago in Nashville. We had another school shooting. This has happened more than once in America, obviously, over the years. It's not the first one to happen in an elementary school, um, but it is something that we want to every single time take a chance to reflect on what we can do and how we can be a part of helping bring change, but at the same time to just grieve and lament and sit in that pain for a little bit. Anytime innocent children aren't safe in their schools, and certainly when life has been lost in such a tragic way, we cry out, this is not right. And um, I don't have the answers all by myself. And I grieve that this Christian school, where I know people who attended and our family lived for a period of time about 8 minutes away from where that happened, it just hits a little bit close to home for us right now because we know people that were involved and that were affected. And so if you're one of those and you're listening to this, I just want to say I am so heartbroken with you. I'm so sad that this happened to people that you know and care for. And I am just sitting in that pain with you. It's hard, and we want to make a difference. And so I would love and welcome any conversation around how we can move forward together by not being silent bystanders, by saying enough is enough. And we may not have all the outcomes and the answers formulated, but our diversity of brains around this problem, I hope, can come together to make a difference. So just know that we are about more than thoughts and prayers here, although we're certainly about that. But we certainly want to bring our brains around this and say, how can we say this is not okay? And we don't have to throw our hands up in the air, and we don't have to be people who just accept this. And as a mom, I'm a part of a group of moms that say we are demanding action. We don't want to settle for the fact that our kids just have to not be safe at school. My own son was in a lockdown just a couple of weeks before this happened. And even though he came out without any scars and was able to come home to us, and I was able to hug him tightly and kiss him on the cheek and was so grateful to see my boy, just those 4 hours he sat in the dark in lockdown and holding a burrito that he couldn't even eat that entire time was enough to just be its own even small level of trauma that no child or student should have to walk through. And yet so many have, and have not come home to their mommies and daddies. And so, yeah, I don't have the answers, but I just want to hold space in this place to open that conversation, and would welcome any of your ideas about how we can move forward and how we can overcome these obstacles together. And wherever you are in the world, you're welcome to join into that conversation. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about this with our guest today at the end on in our Patreon community, and I'd love for you to join us there for that conversation. But you can also DM me on any of my socials, and you can also reach out on our World of Difference podcast community group on Facebook. Would love to hear from you. Let's get back to the show. So rich and so deep, because I think sometimes we preach this theology in some of our churches, and I see this a lot here in the United States in the 3 years I've been back here. We want to market our Christianity in a way that makes God so small and makes what Jesus did for us so minimized. But
Yeah.
if we can't suffer, if we don't know, Jesus was referred to in a fulfillment of an Old Testament scripture, a man of sorrows acquainted with grief. And if we can't walk through Holy Week and understand, Good Friday and Maundy Thursday, and even the betrayal after Palm Sunday that happened so fast and so quick, this praise that was quickly gone from palm leaves and Hosanna to crucify him just days later. The fickleness of our humanity and the ways that we want things to be, right? If we can't understand a God who helps us walk through the valley of the shadow of death and not fear evil and trust that he'll prepare a table before us in the presence of our enemies, we have such a shallow faith, and we're packaging it wrong, because people walk through hard times. Like, that's the gig, that's life, that's humanity. Tsunamis happen, earthquakes happen, husbands get into car accidents, people walk through depression. Our bodies are, every day aging and, changing. And so if our God can't be big enough to help us walk through those times, then who is God really, right? So
Right.
I commend you for your bravery. It takes such courage to allow yourself to go into what is no longer a cheap grace, but a very rich, beautiful, deep grace.
So
But
true.
a lot of people never go there because it is so scary that you're just
Mhm.
going to slide off into the abyss. And so
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. That's a very tender and beautiful experience. If somebody is sort of in that kind of moment right now, what kind of advice? I mean, your friend came to you and just said, it's okay. what kind of advice would you have for somebody who might be afraid to take that step right now to even
Yeah.
consider that?
Yeah, I feel like I'm becoming more and more passionate about this. And this has been like, I feel like even now, something that I'm learning is really, truly being honest with God and knowing that He's big enough to take us on. Like, I'm a mom and I know my children, but when they're naughty, like they're 5 and 6, when they're naughty, sometimes they try to pretend like they weren't. But I know when they're lying to me. I know when they're trying to be sneaky. I know when they're trying to do stuff. And does that make me love them any less? No, no. But our own sin, our own struggle, our own stuff, we think in our heads that like God doesn't know, or like I'm not going to tell him, I'm not going to tell him actually this is how I'm really feeling, or this is what I'm really struggling with, because we just almost think like he's not going to be there for us. But like when you can have a real intimate relationship with God, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, "Come to me," right? Approach the throne of grace with confidence so that you can receive mercy in your time of need. How many of us need mercy in a time of need? But so often we don't come to him. We try to perform for him. And I would just encourage any person that's like truly, truly having doubts, questioning, is God good? Is he real? Is he faithful? Like, don't be afraid of those things. Don't be afraid to acknowledge that you're feeling that way, and you're not a bad Christian for feeling that or for wondering. I think that you're a human being that needs a savior. And it is a one time thing of receiving Christ, but it is a journey of walking out our salvation with fear and trembling. And so just knowing that like God's big enough to take you on, and being really honest with him, as scary as it is, and letting him speak to you in your place of vulnerability is just priceless. And it's honestly a gift. I know it sounds weird to say that, but for God to entrust that to you, um, and know that he, you can see the underbelly of things, I think is incredible.
It is incredible. I went through my own journey a couple of years ago of walking through spiritual abuse and the aftermath of all that meant. And I just, I was reading Job at the time when it happened, which is a beautiful book. If anybody is walking through suffering, just the narrative of what Job experienced, because there's a lot of stuff left hanging and a lot of questions you're left with. But then I just dug deep into the Psalms right after, and the Psalms of lament just came alive to me in ways that it never had,
Mm,
um, and I've been reading in Jeremiah lately. There's a lot of hard stuff that goes on there. But the theme for me throughout, whether you're reading Old Testament or New Testament, is that God is always on the side of the oppressed. And so if you're feeling pushed down and almost destroyed, and that everything's just not turning to gold, it's the opposite. Like God's on your side. God sees and lifts up the lowly. That was Mary's song when she found out she was pregnant with Jesus, was, wow, I've been this lowly person, but I've been lifted up, right? And so
mm,
there's so much in whether, you're a Jewish person who understands and reads those scriptures, whether you identify as Christian, if you're a Muslim, these scriptures are also a part of your tradition. These are just the understanding we have of God and how God works. And I know there's elements of that also in other religions as well. But I find that in the hardest of times, um, some people are afraid they will lose their faith. But my experience has been in those hard times, if I'm honest with the honest questions, my faith has only grown deeper, because I found that I can trust that God is good, even when I have the question if he still is. So
yeah,
thank you for
that's so
sharing
good.
that. And I
Yeah,
know that
that's
you are on TikTok by accident, but you're there, right? And there's a lot on TikTok. I mean, as a mom, I'm like, should I have let my daughter have TikTok? Now I just question whether that was a good thing
Mhm,
ever. But it was the pandemic, and she was like, "I'm 14, let me have it." So, anyway, there's a lot of trash on TikTok, but you are doing something good, and you're trying to make a difference on there. The stereotype for a lot of people is that there's just girls shaking their butts on there, or people preying on the mental health of Gen Z girls and their body image struggles and trying to make a buck off of it.
mhm,
What is your message on TikTok, and how have you crafted
mhm.
that?
That's so good. So I have for different platforms, I guess I've kind of have different messages because I've discovered I have different audiences on like so on TikTok and Instagram, whatever. On TikTok, my account, it was really geared towards motherhood. And at the time, when that took off, so it was 2 years ago, my kids were 3 and 4, and I was working in childcare, and I love children, and so a lot of the stuff, and I have a whole story how I never wanted to be a mom, but a lot of my content was just about like how to enjoy motherhood, like and not like be angry all the time. Like I never thought you could be a happy mom, so I had no idea people would honestly find value in it, but I'd be like, this is how you can connect with your children. And people be like, that's so good. So a lot of it is like, oh, wow. I didn't realize doing a video saying like, you walk past your kid and you just like ruffle their hair and say, I love you is like super valuable for people. But like, I just realized like a lot of moms aren't enjoying motherhood. They don't know how to really connect with their children. There's a lot of mom guilt. So that's kind of like how I grew. And what I'm doing now on there is I'm really, rather than giving like tips on, how to help your kids calm down during a toddler tantrum, because my kids are getting older, I'm wanting to help moms enjoy it more, have more energy. And also because I'm a mompreneur now, if that's something that they want to do, like find stuff that brings them joy and not like just put themselves on the back burner all through motherhood before you really start pursuing the thing that is in your heart to do. That's kind of, I'm adding that in there now too.
I love it. Yeah, motherhood can be such a lonely experience. Um, it can be so isolating, especially when kids are young. And
Mhm.
it's one of those ways we can use social media for good. I live in Silicon Valley and I work in a tech company actually. And the technology we've created out of here could either be used for bad or for good. It could be used to make, like we said, Gen Z girls who are struggling with body image. It can make them feel worse about themselves in order to sell yourself to them, or it could be used in a way to help people who are lonely not feel lonely, but in the very best of ways, like what you're doing. What advice
Yeah.
would you have, for someone who's considering starting out on TikTok and wants to build a community that makes a difference?
Yeah. I think create content that sets your soul on fire. Like somebody asked me the other day, they're like, if you could pause planet Earth and say, like, tell everyone a message, like, what would it be? And so, like, think about that question and then start creating content. I think the thing that I just am so excited about is and I always say this, is you just never know who's on the other side of the screen. And so, like, I could create a piece of content in my home and it goes out to hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of people. And it could be life changing. And that's not just for me, that's for any person has the possibility right now to do that with this. And so, like, I think in the past, we've always thought of like platforms as a stage, but this is a platform that everybody is responsible for and everybody has the opportunity to leverage for good. And I think as believers and as Christians, we are actually commissioned to go out into all the world and make disciples of all nations. Now, I understand discipleship is more than posting a video, I understand it's relationship. But the opportunity to go out into all the world and connect with people through your phone, to me, I'm like, I feel like Jesus would be on TikTok. He'd be
Yeah.
posting, he'd be praying for people through the screen. He'd be being like, I love you. Have a good day.
Yes. And then he'd have the
Yeah.
whole like, hey, this is me flipping the tables because this is wrong. And that would go
Yeah.
viral.
Yeah. He'd have a couple things to say, probably on some social justice issues. So, yeah.
That's funny to imagine, actually, in some ways. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love
Really.
what you're doing. I mean, um, you're taking an opportunity, you're using a technology that's, new in this generation, and you're using it for good. And that's what the task is of every generation. And you've been given this opportunity and you're doing it well. How do you engage? Because some people have, struggle with the whole engagement of followers. So how have you approached that?
Mm.
Building a community around your content through engaging with the followers.
Yeah. So I honestly am like really diligent. I reply to almost every comment. Which probably feels like, overwhelming for some people. And I'm not saying I haven't missed some, but I literally think I'm like, wow, this is a person. This isn't like a username. This is a person with a family, with hopes and dreams and thoughts and opinions and an experience that just took the time to comment on my video, and ask me a question or say something like, that means a lot to me. So I do try to reply to comments, and I try to, just provide value. I think if you want to grow on social media, you have to be service driven. You have to solve a problem. You have to lead with value. It can't, I think, and I will say for Christians, and I really struggled with this because we don't want to, it's almost like we think it's prideful. Like people have been like, oh, you're a social media influencer. It sounds prideful and vain. Like I even
Yeah.
feel that sometimes people say that about me, but this is the truth is we are commissioned to go out into all the world, and it shouldn't even be about us. Like if God is calling us to be the light of the world and to use our voice to share our God-given gifts, talents with the world, I think that we should get over ourselves and start spreading seed. I feel cringy showing up on camera. I get nervous about what are people going to think what I'm saying. I overthink, and I honestly have to die to myself all the time and be like, it's not about me. I'm just going to post it. I'm going to share because I know it could help somebody. So I just think like coming at it from a service mentality rather than like, look at me and look at my life and look at how great I am. It's very like a shift, and I guess it's all dependent upon the person's heart, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's so good. I feel like as women and probably white evangelical Christianity in particular, we can be some of the worst about this type of thing where it's we say servant leadership. Really what we mean is often women serve, men lead. Like I don't know, like that's been sort of the tone sometimes, and we always have to over explain ourselves as women. Look, no, I'm not being prideful. This is not, I'm just using a gift, a God-given gift. And if your God-given gift revolves around being a good communicator or being able to create, content for people in a learning and development way to help, which is, part of both spreading love around the world, loving your neighbors through social media. Your particular bent on how that happens for you is not prideful, but if we hide our gift and don't let our light shine, we sing that little song, right? Hide it under a bush. No, I'm going to let it shine. And if you don't let your light shine, it's actually being, in my perspective, it's being not only negligent of your gift, it's quenching the Holy Spirit in yourself, and it's not honoring what God gave you.
Yeah.
I'm in Joe Saxton's leadership coaching, and she wrote a book that actually started me on my journey with her, Ready to Rise. And she talks about if there's these presents under the tree of the Christmas tree that you never open and you keep walking past them and they just collect dust under there, it's sad. Like open the gift and use what you were given, And so that's how it feels. Like sometimes we have to over explain why we're using our gifts if they look like they're kind of out there for public, consumption or production in that way. But I love how you worded that. And I think that there's probably many women listening to this that struggle with the same thing. What would you say to someone who's struggling with using their gift because it might come across as prideful?
Yeah. I would say this has probably been one of my biggest, like you have to overcome mental hurdles or mental blocks. And I think when I started showing up online, because, you feel so exposed, obviously, that was like a big thing that I struggled with I was like, what are people going to think? Are they going to think, oh, Melissa thinks she's so great. Look at her. There she goes again, posting a video about what she thinks, like all of that stuff. And I really, really had to like shut that Because the enemy, this is the thing, like, let's wise up. The enemy would love nothing more than to shut your mouth. He would. And so, like, we have to start to realize, and that's what I started to realize is I was like, of course, God and the enemy doesn't want me on there. And even if you're not going on there saying Jesus loves you, come into a relationship with him and you're just using your gifts, like, he doesn't want that. He doesn't want us to bring glory to God in any way. And so, for any woman right now that's like feeling like she should create content, whether it's video or blog or podcast, like, just be aware that the enemy does not want you to take ground for the kingdom, and that your gifts, talents, and abilities bring the kingdom of heaven into the earth, and they are valuable. And so just be a wise steward and don't allow the enemy to silence you. Yeah. I don't know if
Oh,
I answered
such
your
good advice.
question.
No, you did. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. We're all a part of this work together. That's the thing that God invites us
Mhm.
into, right? On earth as it is in heaven. Well,
Yeah.
for those who celebrate this, coming week of celebrating leading up to the resurrection of Jesus and also the
Yeah.
death, which we like to skip over because that's the hard part of lamenting and the pain and the grief and probably even skipping over the Maundy
Yeah.
Thursday of washing feet. Nobody likes that part either, to be honest. What is your what are your family traditions or what's special to you about this week?
Oh my gosh. I did a video just yesterday actually talking about how somebody did a post talking about this week. And I was sitting at breakfast with my family, and I was like, oh, guys, like, it's Easter this week. And so I started explaining to them about Jesus and how he came in and, the palm branches, and they shouted Hosanna. And then I was like, and you guys, how he came? He came in on a donkey. And for whatever reason, I just started to cry because it was just so, like, he's so humble. And they were
Mm-hmm.
like, Mom, why are you crying? And I was like, guys, because it's so amazing. They're like, why is it amazing? So I got to tell them, say, like, everyone was expecting this king, and what does a king look like? He looks royal and noble and full of jewels and on a horse. But Jesus didn't come in like that, even though he, like, had every right to. And so anyway, it just opened up this conversation. But I think that, like, one of the best, so as far as like traditions, obviously we go to church, and we do the Easter bunny thing. And to be honest, like, that's just because I'm a child. I think it's fun. But we talk about Jesus, and I think our kids need to see us as moms excited about, like, the story, what he did, like, his whole life culminated up to this week. So I don't know, just talking about it and creating those conversations that are real, and letting them see us, you know, encounter God in our home and whatever it is that we're doing. Yeah, I
I
think,
love it.
sorry, just, we can, like, be like, go to church and do the devotionals, and, like, all of those things are good, but they can become dead works if they're not alive to us. So, like, what's alive? Like, and I think as adults and parents, like, we just need to think about that and make sure that that's what we're communicating to our kids.
Yeah, that's right. And as they get older, like my teens are, um, it's this beautiful opportunity that we have to help them see when we struggle, when we have doubts. I think when they're younger, it's a little harder to open up about some of those things because it can feel overwhelming for their little minds. But teenagers struggle with a lot of things, and so our opportunity as parents has been really beautiful to say, you know what, there's some hard things going on in the church in America, and there are some churches that are scary to walk into. And I'm not sure that Jesus even you know would maybe flip tables in this particular one right now. But to know that there is a beautiful community of the global church that stood for 2,000 years and is celebrated this week, and all the hard parts of it and the good parts is
Mhm.
yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. You're so right about that.
Yeah. Well, as we're finishing up here, I know that several people may be new to you and who you are. And so as they're, getting introduced to you now, wherever they are at in the world, is there anything that would be helpful for them to know in terms of like where to find you? I know you have a couple of, you've written some books, a book, more than one book. I can't remember exactly. And how
Mhm.
can people find you in your writing and your content that you're producing?
Yeah. So I have a website, melissaleehughes.com, Instagram, Melissa Lee Hughes, TikTok, Melissa Lee Hughes. I just launched a podcast called She Can Share, all about helping women entrepreneurs grow their business and their message through social media and sharing. And then I do have two books. The first one is She Can Laugh, which is about more like geared towards health, spirit, soul, and body. And then my kids' book, which is called Mommy Loves You When, which was a video that I did of words that we should say to our kids every day that went viral. And a kids' book company turned it into a kids' book. So,
I
yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
It's so fun. I love just the positive messages that you're sharing, but how it's not toxic positivity, but there's the opportunity for holding that lament, holding the suffering, sitting in the pain instead of glossing over it. And,
No.
our body keeps the score. And when we walk through trauma, we could pretend it's not happening, but our body lets us know. And so the sooner we get
Mhm.
honest with our bodies and our experiences, the better. And then the positivity is real. It can be
Yeah.
deeper and real fruit.
Yeah, that's so good. And I just like, I want to echo you on that is it's so scary. It's like when you have a cut and your mom goes to address it, it's so scary to go to that tender spot and emotionally like that is something that's so easy to pretend like it's not happening because it's not as visible. It is something we can stuff away, and that for sure is my tendency. So, but just being honest with God is so important. So thanks for saying that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for being on today. And I wish you all the best with your new podcast. And as you continue to grow and be an influencer, making a difference around the world. Thanks for being on today, Melissa.
Yeah. You too. Thank you so much, Lori.
You're welcome. Bye. Well, to those of you who are listening in and just heard everything Melissa Hughes was saying and are processing some of that, both maybe as, somebody who lives in the US in a cold place like she does, or somebody who lives in a very warm culture where it's all tropical and you cannot at all relate to the snowy scene of her dragging her children to the snow and having fun with them and becoming a TikTok influencer overnight. Or if you just can relate to the being a parent and how lonely that can be at times and how isolating that can feel. Um, Whatever you're processing today about what she shared, I hope that you do check out her content. She is trying to bring a lot of authenticity to the work that she does. I can say that she's very much the same person I met in person at Podfest and our interactions there, and who she was today in the interview, and then just how she talks about herself in her TikTok videos and on Instagram. I hope that you can find some value in what she's putting out there, both as an author and a speaker, and a social media content creator. And also check out her new podcast. I'm really excited to what she's going to be doing there and helping people in the entrepreneurial world to get some handles and some tools on that. I do just think it's so wonderful when I see people of all different faith backgrounds feeling free to share who they are just very authentically, whatever your faith background and beliefs are. And I just appreciate that she doesn't kind of compartmentalize that part of herself, but she just kind of, puts it out there. So whether you're listening as a Muslim, as a person of the Jewish faith, if you're Buddhist or Hindu, if you identify as atheist or agnostic or a Sikh or whatever your faith background is, or maybe you're just kind of in an exploration phase or a deconstruction phase from Christianity, or you have identified as Christian all the way back through many generations. everyone here can join in this conversation. And I would love to hear your thoughts about this particular episode today. What resonated with you? What challenged you? What inspired you? What confused you or didn't set right with you? Any of it. I'd love to hear your perspective, because all of our diversity of perspectives around these conversations are why this podcast exists. So, yeah. And if you are out there celebrating Holy Week this week, Semana Santa, for those of you Spanish speakers, or you're curious about it, I just would invite you to find a way to dig into that space this week. There's a lot of information available. Always feel free to reach out to me. I love to talk about why this week means a whole lot to me. And yeah, we will be in our family doing some little special traditions that we have around Easter, but also Good Friday and Maundy Thursday, which is kind of a favorite in the family in some ways. And if you don't know what any of these things are, especially some of the things that go on Saturday, which may not be a part of your tradition, there was a lot of silence and waiting on that Saturday. And it's been something that's meant a whole lot more to my husband and I, of what that can look like to feel the silence of the Saturday. So yeah, as you're celebrating and commemorating and digging into all these parts of many of our faith backgrounds this week, I just hope you have a great celebration and commemoration, and however you celebrate that and commemorate it in all your different cultures around the world in the global church. And like I said, if you're curious about any of it, I'm always here to share at least my perspective on it, for whatever that's worth to you. And in the meantime, I would love for you to stick around and hang out for what we end up uploading in our podcast interview at the end. She's going to be on with our Patreon supporters. So if you're a patron, you can check us out on patreon.com/aworldofdifference, and we will be uploading an exclusive episode just with Melissa Hughes, where I ask her to go a little more deep into what her perspective is as a mom of little kids, as an American, on the recent shootings that happened at a Christian school in Nashville, where both one of the workers and 3 of the children and one of the janitors lost their lives in a tragic, horrible, awful school shooting that happened just days ago, and how she's processing that both as a mom with her family, as a Christian, and as an American. This is a hard conversation, and so she digs in and shares a little bit of, rawness about her perspective. And so I'd love for you to check us out on patreon.com to hear what she has to say about that. And thank you to all of you who support us at the A World of Difference podcast through Patreon. It means a great deal to me and helps us offset the cost of this podcast, but also just allows us to have a little bit of a deeper conversation, which I'm all about deep conversations. So if you want to dig a little deeper, check us out there. And we've got also free merch, which I think is so fun. And I enjoy getting coffee mugs and t-shirts out to people. Also, just a shout out to every one of you who already supports us, because we're having a lot of fun over there in the Patreon community. So you're welcome. You're warmly welcome. Consider this your personal invite. And have a great Easter week to all of you who celebrate, and keep making a difference wherever you are. I just wanted to take a moment to break in here and let our patrons know how much the support that you provide every month means so much to me. And I wanted to shout out with a few names. I wanted to shout out the new ones and the ones who've been with me for a while here in the Patreon community, supporting this podcast and offsetting the cost so that we can bring this to you all around the world. And they're making such a difference. I wanted to give a shout out to Noel Young, to John Pyle, Karen Crane, Stephen Peacock, Rick Sample, Arul, Eric Woodard, Corey Myers, Stephen Myers, Angie Riopel, Laura Smith, Genevieve Hoffman, Carrie Still, Matt Richards, Kelly Hurley, and all of you who also support the Patreon community. I will be shouting out names once in a while. You never know when you might pop up. So I just want to thank each of you that I just named and all of the other ones that I have not yet named. And thank you so much for how much you are supporting this work. It means a great deal to me. And if you've not had an opportunity to check out our Patreon community, where we have exclusive content, just for you. You can head over to patreon.com/a world of difference and check out the merch that you can get for free if you join, and also the extra content that we provide and the deeper conversations that you can bring in your perspective to as well. So check us out at patreon.com/a world of difference. You are warmly welcome. If you haven't had a chance to check us out at patreon.com/a world of difference, please stop by and just see what it's like. You can try us for a month for as little as $5, and there's all kinds of different tiers if you want to go deeper and be more involved. But everybody, no matter what level of support you bring into the community, that is available to receive our exclusive content, which is our extra episodes that get dropped just exclusively for our Patreon supporters. So would love to have you go a little bit deeper with us there. If you haven't had a chance to check us out, just try us out for a month and see what it feels like. I'd love to have you there. The more diverse brains we get around these conversations, the better. I grow from your perspective. All of us grow from your perspective. We would love to have you join us in our Patreon community. So check us out at patreon.com/a world of difference. As we're finishing this episode, if you're thinking, I really wish I could learn more or go a little bit deeper, well, that's what our Difference Maker community is for. I would love to welcome you in to join the rest of us there. Once again, it's only $5 a month to join, the price of a latte at your local coffee shop. You can join at our Changers tier. Difference Makers is a community that really means so much to me. It's very special because each time I have a guest on the show, I record something outside of what we give to just the regular podcast audience, where we go a little bit deeper, and then I post those video episodes in this community and we can discuss them. But also at the very beginning tier, which is our Changers tier of this community, you'll get exclusive voting power and help pick podcast topics that give us, more of what we want from your perspective. You'll have access to exclusive 30 plus mini-sodes that aren't out there for the general public. And you'll get every month an exclusive monthly bonus mini-sode. At our Groundbreakers level, which is $10 a month, you can join and get all of that, but also priority access to submit questions to the podcast. And you'll get an additional 2 exclusive monthly bonus mini-sodes. And at our Trailblazers tier, which is $15 a month, the price of 3 lattes a month, you can get all of that, plus also 3 exclusive monthly bonus minisodes, and a patron shout out. So I would love for you to join us at any of those tiers. It'll help you come into this community, be in the midst of all of us, other difference makers, and we'd love to hear your perspective. I certainly would. It's a place to engage more with me and the audience around what you like, what you're resonating with, and once again, go deeper with each of our guests. So please join us in this membership community. I would love to hear your perspective and love to share this extra content with you. So show up at patreon.com/a world of difference.